We were warned to prepare for pain and sacrifice. But Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng also said that this is not an austerity budget. So what is up with Budget 2019? And what the heck is this Netflix tax all about? Full disclosure, if you're looking for detailed analysis of the budget, this is not it! Lots of other people have done a great job of that. But what this is a look at some of the key policies and the one issue that might trip them all up. So, this year's budget is Malaysia's biggest ever at 314.5 billion. But I thought we were trillions of ringgit in debt! If you want to know more about that, check out our episode on government debt. So, where's the money coming from? Economics 101. Here's how the federal budget works. Every year, the Malaysian government has to forecast how much money or revenue they expect to earn in the coming year from taxes, licensing and fees, dividends, and so on. They balance this against the money it will cost to continue running the country. For example, keeping public services like hospitals and schools running, paying for subsidies, and spending on new development projects. The goal is fiscal consolidation.
Fiscal consolidation is matching what revenue they can bring in with what expenditure is going out. And consolidation also leans towards reducing your deficit. So our budget deficit stands at 3.7%, and we project to reduce it to 3.2%, 2.7%, eventually to parity, where we spend as much as we earn.
With huge debts to pay, some major infrastructure projects had already been postponed, like MRT3 and the East Coast Rail Link. On top of that, while we were having that nice tax holiday, shifting from GST to SST cost the country 20 billion in revenue. And that's why, before the budget was announced, Malaysians were concerned that a flood of new taxes were coming our way. But that's not exactly what happened. First of all, while the new budget hasn't dramatically changed the operations to development ratio, Budget 2019 was created using the zero-based budget technique.
Zero-based budgeting is that instead of looking at the previous budgets and making just an increment, the government has come forward with a budget sort of from the scratch. It has allowed the government to actually look at what are the items on which we really need to spend money and what are the sources of income. We have not seen any significant new direct taxes. The government has accepted that there is a budget deficit.
So while originally aiming for a budget deficit of 2.7%, the government has chosen to revise it upwards to 3.4% rather than overburdening us with too many taxes. But there have been some new taxes introduced and others that have increased, like the real property gains tax and its friend, stamp duty.
We will see a huge tax on property owners. I would say it's well targeted. You're taxing wealth, which would help to address inequality in Malaysia. If we track house prices from 2010 to right now, 2018, we see a huge jump since the last recession. It's also a huge bounty of revenue for the government. I believe this makes up a significant amount of the shortfall from the consumption tax.
Filling in some of the other gaps are lifestyle taxes like the sugar tax, the gaming tax, and yep, your Netflix tax. That last one is inevitable, and you can blame the digital economy. The digital economy is an emerging business sector that's potentially worth billions. So at some point, national governments across the world will figure out how to tax it effectively. At the moment in Malaysia, you only pay tax for local digital services like Astro, but not international ones like Netflix and Spotify. When the new digital tax is applied, you'll be paying tax across the board. The idea is to make the sector more competitive, which is a good thing.
The introduction of a digital economy tax, or a tax that would be levied on services that are imported, we think that's a positive development. Malaysia has, as we have heard recently, that aspiration to become a real tiger and to compete with the Asian tigers, and so that would necessarily mean that it will have to become much more competitive and rise up through the value chains in terms of economic sectors that Malaysia is in. The digital economy is a platform for Malaysia to be able to do that.
But it's not just a digital tax that will achieve this. Budget allocations and policies need to be implemented in other key areas.
For Malaysia, I think it will have to invest much more in general education to ensure that all children from grades KG to 12 are learning the way that they should be learning, so they can compete in this global marketplace. It's not only about the money, but it's how you use that money. So it's not so much more buildings and more textbooks, but it's what you do with that school environment, the curricula in those textbooks, and teaching effectiveness to.
And the budget has increased allocations for the health and education ministries. It's also introduced a host of newly targeted subsidies and provisions for the B40 group, such as the electricity subsidy, the National Health Protection Fund, and the employment insurance system, promising to help put Malaysians on more equal footing, leading many to say this is the most inclusive budget we've ever had. But what remains to be seen is how effectively this can all be implemented. Because historically, how close is the budget that's tabled to actual government spending? The answer is pretty difficult to tell.
We lack a mid-year review where we are going to see whether the projects that were proposed have been implemented, and we also lack an end-of-the-year review where we are able to see whether what has been allocated in budget 2019 has been implemented in 2019 itself. Overall, budget cycle is incomplete without this, to see whether actual spending matches the proposed spending.
It's absurd to think that public money can be handed out and never accounted for. The good news is, 2 new acts have been announced to address just that: the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the Procurement Act.
I believe this is a good step in government transparency, because as of now, the Auditor General's reports usually show some discrepancy, especially in the procurement process.
In other words, there's tons of room for corruption and siphoning of funds. Great. So will these acts be enough?
Independent agency or even a special task force would be very useful to audit or keep track of spending by ministry. I think this would greatly help the transparency of our budgeting process. What's another good initiative is if the ministries publish their own accounts, just like how corporations which are listed on the stock exchange have to publish their P&L, their balance sheet, and having civil society be the check and balance against this. Because it is the taxes of the people, and it would be our right to know where this money is going.
These are radical ideas when compared to the Malaysia of yesterday, and it remains to be seen if the new government really has the political will to make such leaps. So, with this budget, did Pakatan Harapan manage to deliver on their election promises? Some of them? Yes! But other big promises have slipped by, especially those for Sabah and Sarawak, like farmers and fishermen's assistance and fair division of development spending. We also missed the chance to talk about some really important things like green energy, sustainability, artificial intelligence, climate change. So, while many of us are praising this budget, there's still plenty to campaign for in this new Malaysia, and only time will tell if the implementation will bring real change and development. Keep watching. Hi! So if you're still watching at this point, you are statistically awesome. It's science. Don't argue it. Let us know what you think about Budget 2019, and if we missed anything out, please do tell us. We try to cram in as much information as we can about what we think is important, but that's not always possible with the amount of time we have. Also, let us know if you have any ideas about what you want to see in our next Newsflash episode. Leave it in the comment section, and I promise we will go through everything.